بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمد ونصلي على رسول كريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask him send peace and blessings on his beloved and our beloved Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The chapter that we're starting today is the chapter 10, and we're sort of coming to the end of the book. Actually, we're maybe about 3/4 of through the book. We've read about 3/4 of the book. I mean, summarized it, but alhamdulillah. This chapter is about the mention of the tightness of the grave, Diqul Quboor, its darkness upon its people, and the light therein because of dua of the living, and the need, or what is narrated regarding the need of the people who have passed away, of the dua of the living, and they're waiting for those duas. So this is the title of the chapter, summarizes whatever is going to be coming afterwards. The first section or chapter, the section of this chapter, it mentions the examples of people who, the reaction to all the Ahlullah, the pious people, how they knew what their understanding of the grave was and how they lived their life by it, how much of an impact. Before he actually mentions the narrations, he mentions many examples of incidences that how, especially in the early Muslims, they had a very strong and deep understanding of what the grave was and its darkness and so forth, and how scared they were of it, that they didn't take it lightly. Of course, from the early Muslims, the greatest example is Sayyidina Osman radiallahu anhu, always mentioned that he's at the grave and he's crying until his beard becomes, or Ali radiallahu anhu is crying when they see the grave. He said, so these are, like, we know that they didn't just pass by the grave, oh, it's just a grave, or totally unemotional, or had no effect. No, they understood the reality of it, and that reality can have only come from one source, which is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he taught them that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, the impact they had, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's teaching had an impact on them. When he talked about the grave and darkness of the grave, then the early Muslims had a very deep and profound impact on them, that even when they passed by the graves, that they'll be in tears, that had a deep and profound effect on their hearts. It wasn't something like, oh, the grave is just, all right, there's a grave, it's no big deal, it's nothing to worry. No, they were profoundly affected by seeing a grave. So the first Imam Ibn Rajab Al-Hanbali, Rahimahulla ta'ala, the compiler of the book, he said that we already read in the second chapter, so this is chapter 10, in the second chapter, right at the beginning, that the qabr says, I'm a house of darkness. I'm a house of tightness, narrowness, constraint. Diq is it's to be constrained and tight and narrow. Except for the one that Allah expands. So we already read this before. Except for the one that Allah expands his grave for. The default mode of the grave is what? It's a place that is constrained, that is dark, and even by logic, if you look at anything that's underground, it's constrained, it's suffocating, and it's dark. But this is the default, but except for who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expands the grave for. Ibn Mubarak has narrated that he narrated from Safwan bin Amr, who narrated from Sulaim bin Amr, who said that we one day went out to a janazah at the gates of Damascus. Gates means the city gates. The old cities used to have walls and the gates. And we had with us Abu Umam al-Bahili radiallahu anhu, great Sahabi, and we prayed the janazah, and then we took it for its burial. And Abu Umama said that you spend your night and you spend your days in a house in which you can you achieve or gain good deeds, hasanat and sayyi'at, good deeds and bad deeds. This world, right? It's a house of what? You're either earning good or you're losing by committing sins. And then you'll be taken to another house. And then he pointed to it, because then this is the grave. Baytul Wahsha, it's a grave, it's a house of solitude, a house of darkness, or Baytul Dhulma, or Baytul Diq. It's a house of tightness, narrowness. Except for the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expands the grave for him, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will transfer you from it to Yawm al-Qiyamah. So this world we're in, then there's the qabr, and then the day of judgment. Um, I- Ibn Abi Dunya has narrated with his chain that Salama bin Sa'id said that Hisham the Stawai, whenever he remembered death, he used to say, the grave, Zulmatul Qabr, he used to talk about the grave, the darkness, the darkness in the grave, and the loneliness in the grave. And then when he used to pass by the graves of, but he used to pass by certain graves. You have gone to. He used to call out his friends who were buried in the grave, people that he knew, his brothers, meaning his friends, his colleagues, or his friends, or people that he knew in his lifetime. And he said, you are where you were warned about. You were told about this, as we are being told now, as we get reminded in Jummah, as we get reminded all the time. We read and we get reminded. We read the Quran and we get reminded. So the warnings of we are now receiving or experiencing what you're experiencing, what you've been warned about. In other narrations mention that Hisham the Stawai, he used to, if the lamp got extinguished at night time, that this was it bothered him a lot. And he goes, you consider it something very big when the lamp is extinguished. He said, he gets very scared at night time when there's no light on. He said, when the light's not on, it reminds me of the darkness of the grave. He goes, he used to get very scared at night time because I think about the qabr, because in the old days, of course, like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can multiply how many lights we got on at night time, how many and each one's got 2 tube lights or whatever, LED lights, and even that might be not enough, we need another light here, lamp here, so I can read or something, eyesight's getting weaker, but we, in the old days, it's when it goes black, it goes pitch black. Those who live in Pakistan probably know this with load shedding. They experienced it. Those, if you ever go to Pakistan recently, especially, this is a normal thing where there's electricity cuts out all the time. But anyway, so it become very dark, and he said that he panicked when it was dark because it reminded him of the grave. Hisham Firdausi, I'm not sure if it's the same person or different person, that he was in a he returned back from a janazah, and he was having dinner that night, and he said that he cannot, he would not have, he didn't have dinner or anything like that night, and he would not sleep in a house where there's no lamp. One night the lamp got extinguished, and he ran out of it. He goes, "What's wrong with you?" He said, I just remember the grave. It scared me so much. How is it possible? So one of the early Muslims, that means that this thing was there, that exists, doesn't exist in everybody. They didn't have it, but generally his understanding was that the grave is, like we hear, the grave is a house of darkness, it's a house of loneliness, and then we change, then we pick up the next samosa or whatever. We totally oblivious to it. But for him, it affected him so much that even living in his own house, if the lamp goes out, he goes, it reminds him of that. It's really gone deep down in the heart to the point of, now people can say, well, there's something wrong with the person. This is a psychological condition. This person has got OCD, or he's got some other label that can be put on the person. Astaghfirullah. But this is a reality. A person has a reality of something, right? Has a reality of something. Like, for example, Abdullah Masud radiallahu anhu, if I remember correctly, he said that if I was made to stand between Jannah and Jahannam, it's one of the senior ulama companions. His whole life he prayed behind Rasulullah. From beginning of Nabuwwat of Rasulullah till the end, because he's the person that prayed behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, always. One of the great fuqaha, jurists of Sahaba radiallahu anhu. And he said, if I was made to stand between Jannah and Jahannam, and I'm given the choice where to enter, I have too much, I cannot bring myself to make this decision before Allah. Yeah, to put my wish and will before Allah, this is a state, right? Someone is in. Obviously, we know that we should desire Jannah, but in front of Allah, I'm too shy to ask for where to go. Sahaba radiallahu anhu they didn't just accumulate information, or they just copied the actions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They took states. They were in states from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they became something with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was a total transformation from what they were, their goals and ambitions, and what they loved and what they wished, and their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not something just a accumulation of information. If I read the whole book, no, these are like we're reading about somebody's condition, that his condition is that the darkness of the grave frightened him so much. There's a hadith of Khalid ibn Khidash that we sat with Al-Ashim al-Balkhi, the uncle of Qutayba, and he was blind, and he used to mention, and it's Allah qabr, like out of pain, hi, I don't know how else to translate it in English. Allah qabr wa dhulm, because on the qabr and its darkness, and on the lahad and on its constraint, how constrained and tight it is. Lahad is the grave that's like generally we have shaq, which is like down into the grave, and then we cover it, right? So the graves are made two ways, either like a trench, or it's made like an L, like sort of like an L, and the body is put aside and it's filled up. And he said, Allah, the qabr and its darkness, and the lahad and its tightness, what can I do? And then he used to faint from talking about the qabr, right? And then he used to come back, and he used to speak again, and then he used to do that again, until that he stood up. He just repeated that over again. So what will happen when the grave? What? And then he used to faint, swoon from it, it used to affect him. He was so overwhelmed by just mentioning the grave that this used to be his condition. That Ibn Muti' said, one day he looked at a house, and he looked at his house, and he liked it, how nice it is. Then he cried, and he said, I swear by Allah, if it wasn't for death, then I'll be happy with you. All right? If it wasn't for death, I'll be happy with the house. You can have an attachment to worldly things, and if I didn't have to go to it and to the tightness of the grave, the constraint, the tightness of the grave, then my eyes, I would cool my eyes with you. Have a nice house, and then look at the nice house, and have a nice lawn, and then look at the nice lawn and enjoy the nice lawn, have a nice garden, whatever, all the things that people do. These people, the Sahaba, Tabi'in, Tabi'in, the early Muslims, they're human beings still. He said, if it wasn't for the grave, I would have. And he cried. He goes, I would have actually enjoyed you. But the brakes came on very quickly. We get into 3 mortgages, and then we get second house. And then we maybe start to, when the body starts becoming weak, then we start to wake up a little bit. But he said he liked it, but he said just straight instantly started crying. If it wasn't for death, I would have been happy with you. I would have enjoyed and be happy with you. And if it wasn't for the fact that I have to go to the tightness of the grave, then I would cool my eyes with you. Then he cried a lot until his voice raised. This is the tarbiyah, the training, early Muslim, the Ahlullah, the pious people, how they were. When they remember death like this, because that's what Islam, that's going to come later. And we've already been reading so much that there's a reality to this, not just the words. There's a reality. People felt to the point of that this is in front of them always. Even the nice thing of the dunya, but I'm going to leave this. I'm going to go to another house. It's in front of them. One of the great ulama in Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Ibn Rajab, I read it somewhere, Rahimahulla. There's some students compiled a few of some things about him. He passed away in the early 2000s, and he said he's in a taxi. One of the students have noted and all these, and the taxi driver said, "What's your name, brother?" And he said, Ibn Uthaymin. And he looked and he laughed. If you're Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin, then I am Sheikh bin Baz, the Mufti of the country. And he said, and Sheikh Ibn Uthaymin said that from the back that, but Sheikh bin Baz is blind, so how can you drive a taxi? So how can you drive? So then he realized, because the way he spoke, he realized, it is him. And it's a very awkward and silent drive after that. There's another incident about him. The king came to one of the kings in the 70s. They came to, I mean, the previous kings, they had more respect maybe for, so he came to his house and he gave him, he said, Sheikh, I want to buy a house for you. He said, no, I have another house in such a suburb. And after he left, the students were shocked. Sheikh, we didn't know you owned the property over there. And he said that was where the graveyard was. He said, I have another house in the, so because you can't say no to the kings, princes in those countries. But it was a polite way. And then there's another mention about him. One of the kings came to his house and brought a what do you call it, a car, brand new car in the 60s or 70s. It's a very expensive thing there. And left and brought it, and the student said he collected dust there for like 2 weeks, and then he asked his students take it to the governor's house, like give it to the state to whatever deal to use it. So like it didn't take it. SubhanAllah, there's some people, including alims, that will chase after the kings, and this is the doorsteps of kings. And there are other ulama, the kings come to them and they turn them away as well. In history books you'll see this, like ulama that one of the ulama, I think Harun Rashid wanted to see him, and he said the only condition that he'll meet him, he said that you come into my house, I'll be in the back, I think it was Harun Rashid, that I'll be in the back of the house, in the back room, I'll cover my face, I don't want to see your clothes, I don't want to see you, like the king does not come in like our clothes, king will come in whatever he's dressed in, and with his entourage and all that sort of stuff. He said, I don't want to see any of that. I want you to come in. I'll be in he put his conditions, because those ulama, Harun Rashid was like an alim himself. He was knowledgeable of deen himself, not like a sort of like a normal king like we have maybe today. So he accepted those conditions. He accepted those conditions, and then that's how he had his face covered, the scholar, and he came and he advised him. In the dark, he goes, in dark, I don't want to see you, I don't want to see anything from you. Like that's how particular they were to protect their akhirah. That if you have not taken this into consideration, if you haven't factored your qabr into your life, what's coming, if this is not a deciding factor, then there is no bigger stupid creature than you. Like more, ahmaq is literally a more idiotic creature on the face of the earth than you. Like I said at the start, the grave is not something, a hypothetical, or just a spiritual concept. It's a reality, and it's coming. So therefore, like for us, we'll probably spend up more time there than we did in dunya. There were people that buried 100 years ago, they're still there. They're in their qabr. People 1,000 years ago, still in their qabr. So we'll probably spend more time in our qabr than we do in this dunya. So we better make it comfortable. We better put some lighting in there as well. We better put some bedding at least in there as well. Through our amal, we better make it expensive, get some good real estate in the qabr, inshallah. And then it mentions that Abdurrahman al-Umari al-Abid, the great worshipper, we gathered with him to meet him, and all the big people of Makkah Mukarramah, they came. And then he was at the Kaaba and he saw the palaces all around. So before, where you see the courtyard of the mataf, where the tawaf is done, beyond that were just houses. So of course, people built nice houses there. There were alleyways there. You can see old pictures. You can see how close. Before the actual masjid boundary was sort of built, there was people used to pray when Hajj used to come. The shops. That's not a long time ago. That's recent, 50 years ago, where before the expansions were done. So if the Jamaat used to go out into the streets, and then on top of the shops, people used to pray the Jamaat in their shops or in their houses, because they was connected to the Haram Salat. So all the people of Makkah, so he saw all the palaces, and he shouted out with his highest voice, "O the people who have built up the palaces, remember the darkness and the loneliness of the grave. O the people of bounties and pleasures, remember the worms and the pus and the degrading of the bodies in the dust." The Sulaiman al-Khawas, someone entered in his presence. He goes, "Why do I see you sitting in the darkness?" So you got one pious person, he doesn't like the darkness. And then because another person told him, because I see you always, he said that the darkness of the grave is more intense. Like he preferred to sit in the darkness because it reminded him of the darkness of the grave. He said, like, I find you sitting always in the darkness. and he said that the darkness of the grave is more intense. It's more severe. Ashad. And just the last one. So one of the Aminat bint Imran, the daughter Imran bin Yazid, she said she saw her father in a dream, and she was talking to him, and then he goes, "How is كيف حالك منذ فارقتنا?" That how has it been since you separated from us? He said, "Oh my daughter, the best hal, خير حال يا بنية." Oh my daughter, the best hal. We're given houses, and we're given places to, like, couches have been put for us, and then in the morning and evening, rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is brought to us for us. Rizq is brought from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from Jannah to us every morning and evening. And he goes, and she said, "What made you reach this station, this level? Like, how did you get this?" He said, "As-sabru salih, righteous, neek sabr." One is sabr, like you don't know why you're making sabr, you're just tolerating it. One is sabr does an act of a, like sabr done in righteousness, in goodness, perfect sabr or complete sabr that you do as in taqwa, right? Sabr without taqwa was one alim explained, is a azab in this world. MashaAllah, went for the biggest one. Start with a small book. The brother's son picked up the book, the most biggest book he can grab. He brought it to his father. MashaAllah. So good start, inshallah. MashaAllah. So how did she ask us? How did you get sabr salih, righteous? So like I said, one ulama said that the sabr without taqwa is azab of Allah in this world. Like as a country or as a group of people, or they're being punished, or they're going through hardship. Right? If they're going through hardship and difficulty, we cannot judge about other people, but ourselves. If the difficulty that comes in this world without taqwa, if taqwa is not there, and we get in problems, then this is azab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not a true, in the sense of sabr, patience, in the sense of that is a righteous sabr. If a person is committing sins and is getting problems in his life, this is like a punishment for him. But for a mu'min who's making sabr and he's got taqwa in his life, he doesn't disobey Allah and hardships are coming on him, but he's holding on to his deen and he's firm on his deen, then this sabr is Allah's nearness is in this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help is with this, and too many favors of Allah comes with that. And the second thing he said, وَكَثْرَةُ تِلَاوَةِ لِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. Profuse, excessive tilawat of the book of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the tilawat of the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all from the azab al-qabr, the darkness and loneliness of the azab al-qabr. May Allah, the loneliness and azab of the qabr. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our graves a garden from the gardens of paradise and not a pit from the pits of hell. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair.